Earlier this year, I made my predictions for what I believed would be the top 10 highest grossing films of summer 2023, and that list is as follows: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, Barbie, The Little Mermaid, Transformers Rise of the Beasts, The Flash, Fast X, Spider-Man Across the SpiderVerse, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And now that the summer movie season has officially wrapped up, I think it's finally time to see how well I did with my predictions. But before we get into the movies that I got right and seeing how they did, I unfortunately must discuss which ones that I got wrong. And this summer, I got 3 out of the 10 movies wrong in terms of my predictions. The first one was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Now, the thing with this movie is that unlike the other two we're going to discuss, this movie actually isn't doing terribly. It's actually doing well for itself thanks to its cheap budget of $70 million, and word of mouth and its legs have been very strong, and given that it's the only animated movie out right now, I think it's going to continue to be strong. It's on the verge of $100 million domestically, and it's about to double that $70 million budget worldwide, which is all very good. It's just that I thought it would be much bigger. I thought the Ninja Turtles fan base would be a lot more enthusiastic to go check this movie out. It's been so long since the last animated one, and it's been especially long since the last Ninja Turtles movie in theaters, and to see this movie not as big as I thought it would was really surprising. I think the fact of the matter is, coming out in August and most kids are going back to school might hurt it a bit. I also think maybe opening it on Wednesday might have been a bit of a dicey decision. I think they got a bit blindsided by Mario's numbers there, and unfortunately it's just not going to crack the top 10. But still, it's not doing terribly. It's still doing rather well. I just thought it would be a lot bigger than it actually has. Now on to the movies that didn't crack the top 10 and even didn't do very well. First off, Fast X. Good gravy. I thought this franchise was unstoppable. Even under the worst circumstances, this franchise has been a huge force at the box office. The last one prior to this did very well for itself when movie theaters were recovering from COVID. It still made a lot of money for itself under the worst circumstances. So to see this movie take a nosedive was really surprising. I thought the buzz and the interest was going to be much bigger than it actually was, and with the fact that this was the first part of a 2-part finale, I thought that would intrigue people a bit more. But no, the sad thing is that the people who went to see this just didn't really like it and didn't convince enough people to go and check out The Family for the 10th time, unfortunately. This was one of the lowest received films in the franchise from audiences, and its legs were even worse. It had terrible word of mouth, terrible legs, and it caused it to be one of the lowest grossing films in the franchise. And even with stellar numbers internationally, it still hasn't helped the movie out, as this is one of the most expensive films of the year, costing around $340 million, which is crazy to see. And given that it only made $700 million worldwide, I apologize, that's just not going to cut it, unfortunately. So while, yes, there is another Fast and Furious movie coming out, it already even, believe it or not, has a date. I'm still a bit worried to see if even fans will go check that out. I think this is a sign that this franchise is losing a bit of luster. Audiences are just ready to get it over and done with. So I think they're just going to have to really try and make this last Fast and Furious movie as big, as stupid, and as great as it could be in order to win fans back. And then the last film I got wrong was The Flash. I'm going to be honest with y'all, I'm going to keep this brief, not because I don't have anything to say about it, but let's be honest, pretty much everyone has said what needs to be said about this movie. This was Warner Brothers' big tentpole movie of possibly the year. They put all their eggs into this one basket. It was the movie they chose to return to the Super Bowl with, for Christ's sakes, and it completely backfired on them. All the hype, all the buzz they thought that this movie would get, from the strong test screenings to all the celebrities they asked to promote the movie, was just not there. People just did not want to see this movie. It just didn't deliver. They didn't convince a lot of people to go check it out, unfortunately. Even bringing back Michael Keaton as Batman wasn't enough for audiences. And for the people that did go and see this movie, they did not like it. It was one of the lowest received films in the DCU, or however you want to call it, and its legs were some of the worst legs I have seen for a summer blockbuster. Good lord. And with a $200 million budget, this only barely getting over that milestone worldwide is just absolutely embarrassing. This was just a horrendous performance for this movie. Clearly not what they wanted to see here. And it caused it to not only be one of the biggest disappointments of the summer, but one of the biggest flops in comic book movie history. Now moving on to the movies that did chart in the top 10. First, we must discuss the ones that did chart in the top 10, but didn't really do what we all thought they were going to. These are the big disappointments. First being Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. While it was certainly more backloaded, as it has started to leg out and somewhat make a name for itself, its opening and its legs prior to this have not been good. Many were confused and even befuddled by how poorly this movie started out at the box office, and I think the main reason was that it just unfortunately got caught up in all the competition. This was just not the right time to release this movie. Had this come out in the fall, or maybe even during the holidays, I feel like this movie could have stood out a bit more and had stronger legs as the big action movie at the time. But putting it out the week before Barbenheimer wasn't the best move. They also tried to give this movie a bit of help by putting it out on a Wednesday, and that didn't really do it. It actually kind of hurt its opening a bit, unfortunately, and its legs prior to this weren't the best, unfortunately. Once again, it has found some legs. It's at $160 million, which isn't bad, and it's pretty much around $500 million worldwide, which again isn't bad, but this is also another really expensive movie. It costed $291 million to make, and that total isn't very good when you compare it to the budget, unfortunately. The next part of this franchise is apparently supposed to come out next summer, if the studio is actually given to the reasonable demands of the writers and actors. So I really think they're going to have to try and do a better job of convincing people to see this next part, hoping that it stands out from the other summer competition. Because it's not like people didn't like it. Audiences really liked it, hence why it's been doing so well outside the top 10. But yeah, that's definitely something they're going to have to consider, trying to convince everyone to go and see it immediately so it isn't as drastic or as big of a disappointment, so it can reach the heights of this franchise once more. And the other big disappointment of the summer was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Of all the movies to come out this summer, this was probably the one that resembled Top Gun Maverick the most. It was a legacy sequel. It was bringing back an iconic figure of the 80s, and everyone loves Indiana Jones, well, the first three. So how could anyone not want to see a new one? Well, unfortunately, that's what happened here. Even opening it on a pivotal 4th of July weekend, audiences just did not want to see this movie. There wasn't a lot of interest. The marketing didn't convince a lot of people to go see it. And to make matters worse, the movie just wasn't that good. People just didn't like this. This resembled more of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull than The Last Crusade for a lot of people, sadly. And internationally, this movie didn't even do well either. It only barely crossed $300 million worldwide, and with a budget of around, or maybe even more than $300 million, this is a big flop. It maybe even be a bigger flop than The Flash. It's just that the legs on this weren't as embarrassing or as horrible as The Flash. But yeah, this movie still did not do very well. It still cracked the top 10, which, yay, I guess, but it still remains as one of the biggest disappointments of the summer for sure. And now let's sway away from the negativity and move on to the movies that pretty much landed where most people and even I expected them to land. First off, The Little Mermaid. Now, this actually kind of exceeded my expectations. I had it a little bit lower than a lot of people, but I saw a lot of other predictions from people earlier this year, and this is pretty much where the movie landed for them, so that's why I'm putting it in this category. As the movie did okay for itself, honestly. It's just that the international numbers weren't as big as they were hoping for. There were reports that bad word of mouth was killing this movie, and even some review bombing internationally hurt it a bit. It would take a while for this movie to reach its international audience, but domestically, this was about in line with the Disney live-action remakes. It's about to surpass $300 million worldwide, which is still a pretty good total, and it even surpassed $500 million worldwide, which is still a lot of money and continues the trend of these movies making a lot of money, whether you like it or not, unfortunately. This movie had a $250 million budget, so a bit more on the expensive side of things, but it's not around $300 million, so I guess it was barely able to reach the doubling point. I'm sure this movie is going to be a big hit on Disney Plus and video on demand, as audiences seem to really like it. It had very strong legs that helped carry it out through the most of the summer, and yeah, not much more else to say. It did pretty okay for itself, given everything. Moving on, we have Transformers Rise of the Beast. This pretty much fell in line where I thought this movie was going to land in the top 10. I just thought it would be a bit bigger than it actually was. It really was that second weekend that really hurt this movie. I saw a lot of people writing this off as, oh, this movie's in danger. This movie is, it had a terrible second weekend, which it did. That second weekend drop off really was not good. It got really hurt by the competition. But then afterwards, it started picking up the pace a bit, domestically at least, and quickly brought back the Transformers name for a lot of people. It even surpassed both Bumblebee and Transformers The Last Knight domestically, which shows signs of improvement. Audiences are looking to get back into this franchise. It seems people are really gelling and really liked this movie a lot, as evident by the legs after its second weekend, and it really was able to become one of the bigger hits of the summer. Worldwide, it didn't fare better than the past couple of Transformers movies. It's the lowest grossing film of the franchise worldwide, but the movie only costed $195 million, which is still pretty big, but compared to the movies I mentioned prior, it at the very least was able to just barely get over the doubling point, so at least it has that. And apparently a sequel is maybe underway. I heard that they were already working on the sequel. I'm not too sure. Maybe someone can update me on the comments, but I think they're pretty happy about how this movie did. It once again, at the very least, surpassing the lowest grossing films of this franchise domestically is a sign of improvement, and it still did fairly well given the budget and given all the competition it had to face off. I thought it was going to be a bit bigger than it actually was, but still not terrible. Next up is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. While this movie wasn't, unfortunately, the number one movie of the summer, the amount it made pretty much fell in line where I thought it would, as Guardians of the Galaxy has been this own little sub-franchise of this massive franchise of the MCU. Audiences just really love these characters, really love these movies, and I knew if the movie delivered, audiences would rush out to see it, and boy did it. This movie really saved the MCU for a lot of people. It shows that they could still make a high quality, big, dumb, fun comic book superhero movie that had humor, heart, and a satisfying climax. I also think that since this movie did give audiences an ending to one of the big franchises, it also was able to benefit from that, and a great ending to that. It really was a touching, sweet ending, and it's one of the few big expensive movies this year to actually make well over its doubling point. It made like roughly $800 million worldwide on a $250 million budget, which is great. It's definitely a lot of studios and a lot of movies wish they would have made the money this movie did. And yeah, completely crushed it and dominated this summer, until it was surpassed by Spider-Man Across the SpiderVerse, which I don't think anyone was expecting to surpass Guardians to become the highest grossing film of the summer for the time it was. We'll get to the actual big movie of the summer later. But yeah, there were a lot of people expecting this movie to do pretty well, like a slight increase from the total of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but this movie had such a massive boost, and I think that's because they waited the right amount of time to put this movie out, as since Into the Spider-Verse release, the fan base and the acclaim for that film has just grown and grown. More and more people started to realize, oh my god, this movie is actually amazing. I should have given this a chance a long time ago. And because of that, the hype and the interest and the buzz for this next one was so big, and it became the second biggest animated movie of the year behind the Super Mario Brothers movie. And like I said, domestically it topped Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It wasn't able to do that worldwide, but still, on a budget of around $100 to $150 million, $600 million worldwide is a very good total. They kept the budget reasonable, for a big summer blockbuster, and it reaped the rewards. And when the second part of this Spider-Verse sequel comes out, whenever it does, I'm sure it's going to even get a bigger jump from this movie's total, and I look forward to seeing how well that does. But yeah, as far as this movie is concerned, this movie just exploded. And to end things off, we end the predictions list with the big surprises, the movies that caught everyone off guard. First off, Elemental. This movie had the worst preconceptions I've ever seen for a Pixar movie. It had a terrible opening weekend, 29 million domestically, 44 million worldwide. This didn't seem like just a bomb. This seemed like flop awaiting. But then something interesting happened. When more and more people started to see this movie, it started to grow legs. Audiences decided to give this movie a chance, and they encouraged everyone else to go and check it out, and it quickly became one of the bigger hits of the summer. This is definitely the comeback story of the year, pretty much. After such a terrible opening weekend, to see this movie become the biggest Disney animated film since Frozen 2 is absolutely incredible. This film just had such a wonderful response, had great legs. It certainly salvaged Pixar after the disaster that was Lightyear from, last year. It revived the Pixar name for a lot of people and shows that Pixar still has a foot in the box office, and this movie is still growing, as it just released in Japan and it's still crushing it over there. It did extremely well in South Korea, and it's looking ever more likely that this is going to surpass $500 million worldwide. We'll see when it gets there. It may not get there by the time this video comes out, but when it does, it is certainly going to be something to celebrate about. Even with its $200 million budget, which is definitely way more than this movie needed to cost, you cannot deny the legs and how big of a comeback this movie was able to achieve here. This is something unlike anything I think a lot of people were expecting for this movie. Once again, especially after that opening, it just seemed like dead on arrival, but no, it surpassed those expectations and became the third biggest animated movie of the year, behind the aforementioned Spider-Verse and, of course, Super Mario Brothers. Following that up, we have Oppenheimer. This was the antithesis of a summer blockbuster. It's a prestigious awards-type film, 3-hour talkative drama about the creation of the atomic bomb. 10 years ago, this would have come out like in the fall or maybe around the holidays to drive up awards buzz, but no, this is coming out in the middle of summer, and it was able to be a juggernaut of a movie. large in part due to the Barbenheimer meme. The buzz and the interest for this movie skyrocketed, mainly because its competition was, well, Barbie. And don't worry, folks, we'll get to that movie in a few. But yeah, the buzz was there. It had a very solid marketing campaign, and because it was just the complete opposite of what you'd expect out of the summer, I think it really allowed it to stand out from the crowd. It had very strong legs. All types of people, young or old, went to see this movie. Well, maybe not, children. It is rated R. But you know what I mean. It was Christopher Nolan's best received film in a while. Definitely, I think audiences preferred this over Tenet, and because of its great response, because of how it was able to stand out from everything else, not only was it one of the biggest surprises of the summer, it's now one of the biggest movies of the year. It's Universal's second biggest movie of the year right now, only behind the Super Mario Brothers movie, which I've said this plenty of times on the Box Office Chat web series, but imagine telling yourself these things about Oppenheimer like 4 months ago. I don't think you'd believe anything I was telling you, yet here we are. And yeah, once again, another movie with a very solid budget, just $100 million. This is definitely one of the more profitable and easily one of the most successful films of the summer. And like I said already, one of the biggest surprises of the summer. Another big surprise was Sound of Freedom. I don't think anybody had this movie on their radar, like, at all. In my defense, I didn't even hear about this movie until like a couple days before it was coming out. I didn't even know it existed, yet somehow it was able to find an audience for itself, make a name for itself, have strong legs, and become one of the biggest movies of the summer, surpassing the likes of other blockbusters that I think many people thought would do much better than this. It even topped Indiana Jones on the 4th of July, which is crazy to think about. This is this is the only film of the year to have an A+ cinema score rating. Word of mouth really drove this all the way to, well, success. And because it is the cheapest movie in the top 10 with a $14 million budget, with how much money this movie has made, it is definitely, like Oppenheimer, one of the more profitable movies of the summer. And yet, despite all the controversy surrounding this movie, all the random conspiracy theories and the pay it forward program, this film still was able to find an audience. It was still able to leg out, stay ahead of the pack for a while, and easily became one of the biggest surprises of the summer. And now, not only do we end with probably the biggest surprise of the summer, but the biggest movie of the summer, which was Barbie. I, like a lot of people, thought the film would crack the top 10, but I just didn't know how big it would be. I thought there were some things that could hurt it, how weird and bizarre it was. Would anyone really all go in droves to see a Barbie movie? Would this really tap into the zeitgeist? And it did, folks. It really did. This movie did so much better than I think a lot of people, even the people who had the highest expectations, did not expect this movie to do as well as it did. It had a great opening. It's had stellar legs, incredible word of mouth. This really felt like the movie everybody needed to see this summer. It was the one I've seen the most people talk about, and the one that everyone, at least the majority of people I know who have seen this movie, whether it be from quoting it or just talking about the experience of going out, dressing up like Barbie or Ken or whatever, this really was a phenomenon. The marketing was fantastic. The buzz was really strong. Word of mouth and legs, like I said, were superb, and it helped carry this to become the biggest movie of the summer, as well as the biggest movie of the year, surpassing the Super Mario Brothers movie, which, like I said with Oppenheimer, imagine telling yourself that a couple months ago. I think you would call yourself crazy, yet here we are. This was just a huge phenomenon, and it's still going, folks, because this movie is still in theaters. It's still holding rather well, still making the moolah, and with its $145 million budget, it's safe to say that this is definitely a win from Warner Brothers after the terrible year they've been having. Like I said, The Flash didn't really do well, but even before that, the only major win they had this year was Evil Dead Rise. So to see them get not just a win, but a huge win like this is definitely something to be proud of. This movie just did absolutely incredible, and it seems like it's still going to do incredible throughout the remainder of its theatrical release, maybe even into the fall maybe. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, this is not only the biggest surprise of the summer, but the biggest movie of the summer as well. So there you have it, folks. Those are the top 10 summer movies of the year. And comparing it to last year, I definitely can say that it wasn't as big of a summer season as last year. In hindsight, if I'm being honest, I think I might have been a little harsh on some of the movies last summer, because say what you will about Thor: Love and Thunder and Jurassic World Dominion and even Doctor Strange, those movies still made a lot of money. They made over $700 million worldwide, which are still great totals. Like nearly half of the movies this summer couldn't even come close to that, which is embarrassing. I think we have seen a change in audiences' taste and interest in movies. If a movie isn't great or worth the price of admission, audiences aren't going to rush out to see this. You can't just be a big blockbuster. You have to be a great blockbuster that exceeds people's expectations. That's what we saw with stuff like Barbie and SpiderVerse and Guardians and Oppenheimer. Even some of the smaller stuff like Sound of Freedom and Elemental, even those movies, even the smaller ones, were able to exceed people's expectations. They didn't expect them to be as good as they were, or they were as good as they were hoping they were. They were hoping those movies to be, and I'm guessing they just had really high expectations. And I'm sure you've heard this already, but I also think that the budgets need to die down, because look, it's fine if you have one movie that costs like 175 million. Hell, it may be even okay to have like 3 of them, one for the beginning, middle, and end of the year. But to have so many of them come out in the span of like 3 months is ludicrous, because they're all just going to come out around the same time. They're all going to cannibalize each other's box office, and they're not going to make the money they need to. Like June especially, everything was coming out around that time, and you saw a lot of movies suffer from all the competition and the ridiculously high budgets. Transformers suffered on its second weekend because it got lost in the shuffle. It would, grow some legs and pick itself back up from the rut, but it was still facing some trouble, and it still just barely got over the doubling point worldwide. And the less said about The Flash and Indiana Jones, the better. So I really think they need to make sure these movies live up to the high expectations of audiences. They really need to deliver on quality and control these budgets, because releasing so many of these expensive movies in a short amount of time is just ludicrous, and it's going to cause more films to fail than succeed. So definitely going to be an interesting thing to see in the months to come. We'll see, maybe even the years to come, we'll see how and if studios learn from this summer, if they learn the right lessons or the wrong lessons. Definitely going to be interesting to see, especially next summer, as even if there is next summer, if the studios will finally give in to the reasonable demands of the writers and actors. But anyways, I even see some of the problems this summer happening next summer, as there are 4 movies coming out on Memorial Day weekend next summer. Of course, this is subject to change. These movies could get delayed, but as far as right now, Garfield, Furiosa, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and If are all scheduled to come out on Memorial Day weekend. Unless if at least 2 of those movies move up, which is definitely a possibility, there is no way at least 2 of them, maybe even 3 of them, suffer because of cannibalization of each other. So yeah, once again, I think they need to space these movies out. I think they need to get the budgets under control, and I think these movies just need to deliver on the quality. Otherwise, we're going to have a repeat of this disappointing summer movie season. And that's gonna do it for this summer's 2023 box office predictions, results video thing. I hope you enjoyed it. What were your thoughts on the summer box office this year? Do you agree with me? Do you think that it was a decrease, or do you not see any problems? You're fine with how the movies did. What were your favorite movies of the summer? What were your disappointment? And in terms of your summer predictions, how well did you do? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.